Most of us were never taught how to deal with conflict. Not at home, not in school, definitely not at work. But what do you do when things keep bubbling under the surface? When you're biting your tongue, carrying stress, or dreading that one person on the team who just grinds your gears? What if conflict, though, could help create deeper relationships, better leadership, and more connected teams? Whether you're working the shop floor or sitting in the boardroom, tension shows up, and how we deal with it can either build trust or quietly break it. This is Healthy Conflict, the podcast where we stop treating conflict like a problem to avoid and start treating it like an opportunity for greater success. Because the best leaders, the ones people actually want to be with, aren't the ones who shut conflict down. They're the ones who get good at tough conversations. This isn't just about being a better communicator. It's about building cultures where people want to stay, grow, and give their best. I'm Rainey Martin, and I help entrepreneurs, leaders, and teams improve their bottom line by building workplaces that people love and customers never forget.
And I'm Rasha Shaheen, and I help visionary leaders and founders step out of the daily firefighting and into their zone of genius by designing cultures that thrive without them. So, hi, Rainey. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. And I just wanted to start by kind of saying the reason, like, why are we doing this podcast and what makes it different? And for me, one of the reasons why I'm really happy to be here and have these conversations is that most of us were never taught to deal with conflict, not at home, not at school, and definitely not at work, you know? And so it's important to kind of explore and unravel kind of like what we're going to be touching on is the opportunity of conflict because we avoid it. So why is this? Why are you in this room? Why are you here? Why do you think you want to have this conversation? And what's going to make this conversation different from other conversations around conflict?
Yeah, great questions, Rasha. Yeah, and I think I totally agree with you. Like, it's so funny how in schools we teach really important topics, but some really critical topics like emotional intelligence and budgeting, right? Handling your finances and handling your feelings and handling conflict are
Yeah,
just not skills that get developed as we're growing up. And so it's left to, your home life. And a lot of times, most there's almost nobody that's really well trained in handling conflict, right? Or emotional intelligence. And
yeah,
so where are we going to get those skills? Some people
exactly.
go out and get them, but a lot of people just muddle through. And what does that look like, right?
Yeah,
Resentment, or walking on eggshells, or being passive aggressive, right? Eye rolls, or sighs, or walking away, power struggles. I mean, we have all kinds of unhealthy ways of dealing with conflict, right?
yeah,
Ways that don't resolve anything and that often make conflict worse. And so, why am I here? I'm here to learn more about dealing with conflict more effectively and help others learn more about that. I think it's one of the most incredible, useful skills anyone can master in this world today.
yeah. I love it. I love it. And what I usually see, when I'm working with teams, is that we're either on one side of the seesaw of the fence where we avoid conflict, and what that does is it brushes important conversations under the carpet, and we just don't move. There's no room for innovation because we can't talk and be comfortable with being uncomfortable for a little bit. And then on the other side, it's like a bull in a china shop. It's just like you're comfortable with conflict, but you do it in such an aggressive way, or the person receives it. Maybe you don't even mean it, but the person receives it in such an aggressive way. And again, that just kind of like doesn't allow room for growth. It doesn't allow room for innovation again. So both sides, overconfident and aggressive, and then avoidance isn't the answer. And it's being able to find that sweet spot. Um, yeah.
And
So
also, it's
yeah,
about approaching conflict as an opportunity rather than as a danger zone, right?
That's
I
it.
think that's all that tends to be everyone's go-to, is that conflict is something to avoid or crash through because it's scary, it's
Yeah,
dangerous,
yeah,
it can be relationship damaging or destroying, right?
yeah,
And in so many situations, friendships, work relationships, you're afraid of relationship destroying experiences,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And the funny thing is that like when we avoid conflict, one of the reasons why we might be avoiding it, so talking from that side, is that we're worried about breaking a kind of trust. You know, we're worried about offending. But actually
Yeah,
what happens is when you don't avoid, when you do confront in the appropriate way, you're actually building trust.
exactly. Well, I mean, it's certainly an opportunity to deepen a relationship, to be more effective in your dealings with someone, and to once you go through conflict effectively with another person, you learn resilience in the relationship, right?
Yeah,
And so,
yeah.
yeah, there's nothing
So
healthier for a relationship.
yeah. And so one of the things that like, is useful to bring up is that actually, or what I want to kind of do, and I know that you're kind of similar in the sense that like it's changing and reframing conflict. So conflict not being danger, but actually being information, being a signal, being a diagnostic tool. So something matters enough for people to care. It's creating a tension, which, you know, tension, that uncomfortable place, is an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for clarity, for reconnection.
Exactly. Exactly. The fact that there's conflict is information for you, right? It's great information. It's information about, um, what is it about? It's about whatever is bringing up the conflict, whatever the conflict brings up, right? Does it bring up a question of boundaries for you? Does it bring up fears for you? Does it bring up and what is it bringing up in the first place? Like, what's the conflict about? And why do you need to pay attention to it? What can you learn from it? How can you grow from it? Right? It's all about information, useful, critical information that you can take and deepen the relationship with, or grow from.
Yeah.
So
And going,
conflict isn't.
yeah,
Oh,
go for
sorry.
it.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, conflict isn't the problem. It's a signal that your system needs attention in some way.
Yeah, spot on. I love that. And I was just wondering, I was just thinking about like when was the recent time that I've had conflict, and like I haven't, like if I'm honest, like recently I haven't had like, so I'm going to give like an example maybe of a minuscule kind of type of conflict, and it's like when we're having conversations and about, designing something, and then there's tension. There's like one person wants it to go one way, and another person wants it to go, a different way. I want it to go a different way, and I think attitude is really important. Like if we kind of like, there is going to be tension because we're celebrating diversity of humanity. We're celebrating different ideas. So there will always be tension. We're never going to get away of not having tension. So if we can, if we create a tool or something that kind of allows us to kind of recognize that conflict is normal, tension is normal, but how do we kind of like surf our way through that? And I would say that one way is aiming for it doesn't have to be one way or the highway, like aiming for a win-win, you know
Hmm.
but before that, even like having that intention, I think it's important to kind of build trust. Trust allows tension to exist, and kind of going in with these unknown conversations, or with intention, as with a curiosity,
Right. I mean, I think it's tricky, like we've talked about before, when there's hurt involved,
Yeah,
right? When there's hurt involved, you have to somehow overcome or address the hurt before you can come with curiosity. Before, because you're this the psychological safety has been broken, right? And so it's one thing um if it's a conflict that's about, like you were saying, where one person wants one way and another person wants another way, versus um when one person is feeling attacked by another person, right? Whether it was intentional or not. Um, so the responses to that can be different in terms of what we're willing to do, how we're willing to where we're willing to go, right?
Yeah.
Because if we're feeling hurt, then we're not in a space where we can be curious, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess a kind of like a tool that you can have, like, so if you're feeling hurt, that, this is all part of like self-development in a way, and emotional regulation, to recognize that, like, to build up your own kind of validation, like, away from the conversation, kind of like recognize your needs, your worth, so to speak, so that no one kind of like is able to trigger you. So kind of getting some grounding exercises, just kind of like putting yourself in that space where, okay, you calm down and just recognize what's important, and recognize what you need.
Right, like practicing self-empathy, right?
Yeah.
Right. Being okay with where you are,
Yeah.
validating yourself,
Yeah.
validating where you are. And with, if you have a background in positive intelligence, right? We've talked about PQing it up, right? Doing a little meditation or
Yeah.
a PQ rep to center yourself,
Yeah.
to get in touch with your higher self, your deeper wisdom, right? And that place where you don't have to validate, you don't have to justify, you you are okay with all that is.
And I think what that does is it recognizes that you have power, you have agency, you have control over your feelings. You know how to get yourself to feel kind of like, okay, yes, when hurt or kind of pain comes along, you're able to shift yourself out of that. So when you kind of shift yourself out of that, and then you go into a conversation to kind of unravel and explore why or what the next steps are. I mean, then you can do that, because ultimately as well, there is a cost to not confronting, to not exploring, to not addressing the hurt that happened. So the cost of avoidance is, of those kind of conversations, can be, burnout, disengagement. If we're talking about the workplace, um, top performers can kind of turn into quiet quitters. And and if you're scared of confronting a conversation, then it could lead to a fear-based culture, which is what we don't want. So
Right.
there's two
Absolutely.
kinds of conversations here. There's at work and maybe at personal, but in essence, I think it is the same. Like, by avoiding a conversation, it's not healthy.
It's not healthy, and it actually, more than conflict, damages the relationship, right?
Yeah.
Because because it erodes trust when you aren't honest and you don't confront the reality of something that you're going through with another person, then it subtly and sometimes overtly erodes the trust that you have with each other, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And both of you feel like the relationship is superficial or isn't authentic enough to withstand conflict, right?
Yeah. So you miss out on all the gold. You miss out on kind of deep relationship
Right, right, exactly,
in the
exactly.
work and out the work. And deep relationship in the work is that safe space to kind of explore and innovate and create and be productive. And out of the
Yeah,
work, it's just fun and joy,
right.
that you can
And
get to higher levels of fun and joy. It's not, fun and joy isn't constant.
right, you can get to, yes, higher, deeper, yeah, more powerful, right? And when you avoid conflict because you're worried about damaging the relationship, you damage the relationship, right?
Yeah.
Conflict avoidance is as damaging or more damaging to a relationship than addressing the conflict head on. It's just about how do you address it effectively? How do you address it in ways where it does turn into a win-win?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess I can, from experience, I've been working with a team. I've been working with a marketing team, and what I know before I did an 8-week project with them, and the before and after was quite measurable, significantly measurable, and really what happened was that we were being vulnerable with each other and building trust
Right. Right.
and
Right.
listening
And that
to stories. Yeah, go for it.
sorry, that's why working with teams in a coaching environment can be so powerful, right? Because you can transform a team, which is what we've talked about before, which is what I did at Wayfair, right? You can transform a team from butting heads and being full of conflict to being synergistic and effective and efficient together. And it doesn't mean they don't have conflict. It means they know how to handle conflict effectively.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they feel seen, they feel heard, and they don't need to question that the other person is, degrading them or not degrading them, because the trust is there, the layer of trust is there. So really the conversation now isn't personal, and you don't even need to think that it's personal. It is just about the topic, the product,
Exactly.
the act,
Exactly. The situation.
the situation. Yeah. The
Right.
scenario.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's what happens. The benefit of going into this conflict is that, like, communication happens so much easier, less micromanaging, less, turnover, less sick days, and leaders are able to have more time for strategic thinking rather than firefighting, and innovation flows.
Right. And the team becomes so much more productive, right?
Yeah.
Because they know how to interact in a way that where they're interdependent but not codependent, where
Mm,
they're addressing issues on the fly in healthy, productive ways, right? They feel safe to innovate and grow and make mistakes, and
yeah.
all those things create a high functioning team, a high performing team.
Yeah. And that is exactly what happened with the team that I was working with.
Of
They was
course.
it was more fluid, they were more happier, there was less, there was just meetings kind of like, or conflicts did happen, but they were resolved in 5 minutes as opposed to like 1 hour or 2 hours or one day, like. So yeah, it's a brilliant kind of like shift, a brilliant reframe. And there's again, I want to shift it to kind of two parts of the conversation, because what we did with this team is like we were building trust. And what happens when the trust isn't there? So there's kind of like, you've got to build trust. I like this equation that I have, is that healthy conflict is like equals trust being the multiplier, because without trust, anything you say could feel like an attack, but with trust, it's just that the information can be soaked in and taken on board. But you also need curiosity, because you need to go in and kind of like listen to kind of the other person without being prepared to say what you want to say. Clarity of what you want in terms of, your end goal. And courage to even just have the conversation and just kind of like keep pushing.
Right. 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 Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I love that equation of yours, Rasha. Yeah, I feel like it fits in so many contexts. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So so maybe just a little bit back to that idea of like what what information are you getting when conflict comes up, right? What's the signal, and what is it that's mattering enough that things suddenly feel hard? How is that important, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess this is the thing. Sometimes I'm kind of exploring now that, like the tension happens maybe because you're not able to articulate what the need is. And so kind of when tension comes up, it's like it is a signal to explore what's really going on here. And it doesn't
Hmm.
mean that, like, you can resolve things kind of like, sometimes, yes, it's okay if you've got the tools. Well, you can, but you can just go away and say, I, you know, because it's going to be different for every scenario. So, like, explore the scenario, but you might need to kind of just go away for a little bit and just have a little bit of time for yourself and explore what's the issue here. Why is this a tension for me? Is there room for negotiation? Can there be a win-win? Because essentially, when a conflict happens, one person is seeing something one way and another person seeing it in a different way. Can we kind of delve deeper and kind of explore values, maybe? And is there room, is there room to kind of really um, find out whether, what you're saying actually is not the thing that we need to focus on. There's something deeper that we can kind of negotiate, and then it ends up being a win-win for everybody.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. What's what's the information here that can
Yeah,
be useful to you
yeah,
or to me? Yeah. 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 And what can I explore that will be helpful both in resolving the conflict or approaching the conflict and in learning about myself and in
yeah.
learning about the other person or the group and go ahead, Rasha. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking of, like, trying to kind of get an example in, and it could be, it's just like, if I just use a really simple analogy, a simple story of one person kind of wanting to go to one restaurant and another person wanting to go to a different restaurant, and they really want to just go to that restaurant. The other person, you realize, oh, they just, because they really like fish, they fancy fish, and then the other person really wants to go to that restaurant because actually it's close and they can't be bothered. So when you find out the kind of the underlying reasons, then you can kind of go, all right, well, there's actually another fish shop just close by, and then they both win.
Yes, agreed. There's definitely a level of conflict where if you just go to the underlying why,
Yeah,
there can be a quick fix.
yeah,
Absolutely. And
yeah,
if you don't go to the underlying why, it
yeah,
can get really blown out of proportion very quickly, right? And it can have damaging effects when
yeah,
it doesn't
yeah,
need to. Yeah.
yeah. And there is the element of kind of getting to, like, get to know yourself a little bit more, kind of getting to understand where your boundaries are in terms of what you'll say yes to, what you'll say no to, and it doesn't have to be a conflict. It could just be a recognition.
Mhm. 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 Yeah. Absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely.
you can agree to disagree.
Mhm. Right. It doesn't necessarily have to resolve itself in one person winning. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
So, yeah.
yeah, I was going to say, like, if we kind of like round this up for today, and continue the conversation next week, um, what do you think the kind of like the one small shift, what summary, takeaway from this conversation? What is it for you so far?
Yeah. I mean, I think what we're saying here is that conflict means that something matters, right? Conflict's a signal to
Yeah,
us. And when you learn to handle it well, your team, your business, and your own well-being all benefit.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's perfect. It's really, there's a mindset shift really around what conflict is. It's a signal. It's an opportunity. It's an invitation.
It's an invitation, right?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
innovation, really. Yeah,
Yeah. And here's an invitation to our listeners, right? Where are you avoiding conflict right now?
yeah,
And what might it be trying to tell you?
love it, love it. So, in that sense, let's wind this conversation and with our outro, kind of say that conflict doesn't mean something's wrong. It means something matters, and when you learn to handle it well, everyone wins. Your team, your business, and your own well-being. So, with that in mind, I invite everyone to stay steady, stay human. This is where real leadership begins. And see you next time. Thank you for listening.